What's going on, guys? So tonight's video is just going to be a chilled back late night session. It's going to be about Femdom, and it's going to be more specifically about my poppers addiction and some of the helpful tips that I've come up with on how to decompartmentalize if you have a poppers addiction. And like all these things, I've searched YouTube and other sites, and I really have never found anything to my knowledge about dealing with a poppers addiction. And I have a couple other videos in the courses, in the bonus content, that go into poppers addiction. There's a more in-depth one in Femdom Destroyer, so you can hop in there and take a look at that, and I can work with you more one-on-one if it's something that you're dealing with. But you know, yeah, man, I'm just gonna be chilled back, like I said in this video, because it's kind of late. But I was hooked on poppers for, I think, about 3 years, and at my worst I was doing them every single day. Most of the time I wouldn't do them during the day, but I would do them every single night. After I would get home from work, I would do them. And there was probably a year, it might have even been 2 years, where I basically did them every single night. And so if you're not familiar with poppers, it's an inhalant. They're sold as typically like nail polish remover. And in the US, it's usually isobutyl nitrate is the chemical. And the popular ones, I'll probably post some pictures on like the thumbnail of this video, but the typical brand names that you usually will see will be Rush poppers or Jungle Juice. Those are the two most popular ones. And so I was already into Femdom before I ever got into poppers. And I was into Femdom for several years, even, you know, on and off. And I would sometimes see a video where I would see like the Dom holding the little bottle, and it was just never something that I was interested in. I honestly just had no idea what they were. Like, I guess I knew they were like saying hold it and sniff it or whatever. And so one day, I guess I was bored, and I just decided that I was gonna go get a bottle of poppers and try it. And man, the second that I hit that bottle and I sniffed it, it was like game over. And game over in the sense that I was hooked. And it's like, if you already have, or I should say for me, I already had a Femdom addiction that was pretty bad, and it like 10x'd my addiction that with the first sniff of the poppers. Because what you have to realize is that you're trying to usually numb some sort of feeling when you're dealing with a Femdom addiction. And so, let me sit up. You're trying to run away from yourself. You're trying to numb yourself. You're trying to, you know, like I said, watch my last video on porn escapism. And I go into that a lot more deeply, into how you're trying to run away from yourself. You're not comfortable with yourself. And so with the poppers, it was like numbness times 1,000 even. It was just complete derp state, complete zoned out. And it made the Femdom sound better. And it sounds weird. Here goes the copper. It sounds weird, but it doesn't have to be Femdom. Any auditory sound. And if you guys, and I actually don't know how big a deal poppers are. I think there was a car crash over here, actually, looks like. Yeah, someone just crashed a car. I can't flip the camera around. Maybe I can. It doesn't matter. It's all right. So yeah, with the poppers, it completely derped me out. And so yeah, so I was talking about the auditory thing. So it was really weird. With the auditory sounds, I mean that things just sound better. So even after I had beaten Femdom. I still stayed addicted to poppers for quite a while, and there's like 5 or 6 cop cars now. Not sure what's going on over there. Even, here, I'll pause this and I'll take a video of it real quick so I can see. Let's see what's going on over here. Zoom in. I think someone hit that bus is what it looks like. So it sounded like someone hit the bus with their car, and it looks like what's going on. Anyway, I'm gonna flip this back around. All right, so going back to this idea of the auditory sound, I realized, and this is what I'm saying with, if you have a hardcore poppers addiction, work with me directly, because I broke it down and it fucking took me a long time to figure out how to do this. But for me, I had to decompartmentalize it. So I realized that, one, I was addicted to the sound that I would get when I would sniff the poppers, meaning for some reason, people talking, especially if it's music playing in the video or ASMR, I got super hooked on that with sniffing poppers. And again, just this very much the derp state, trying to numb myself, trying to escape from myself, not being comfortable with myself, and you just like put yourself in this cocoon. It's the same thing when you know, like what a heroin addict's doing, for the most part, what an alcoholic's doing. And the poppers are the same way. It's like you sniff the popper, you go into bliss land, you forget about all your problems, you get that temporary high. But the auditory sound, even after I had beat Femdom, I was still addicted to sniffing poppers and like watching ASMR or porn. I know this sounds crazy, but the sound of like a blowjob on when it's being recorded, like visually, yeah, it looks good, but like when you're on poppers, that like, it just, for me, it sounded amazing. And I realized that was like one of the main components that was keeping me hooked on the poppers. There's other popper addicts here, man. Hopefully this can help you. And again, reach out to me. I'll put my link to hop on a free call, and I'll show, you know, whatever, somewhere on this video, or it'll be down somewhere in or I'll pin in the comments. You'll find it. You can just hop on a free call and talk to me about this if you want, and then work with me more if you want to. But so that was the first thing, the auditory component. And then the second was, I realized I was addicted to the act. And this is the case you'll see with a lot of addicts. They're not actually addicted to the substance in many cases, or they're only partially, but a lot of it is that ritual leading up to doing the act. Like, it's that whole process of wanting it, looking at, you know, different bottles online, thinking about it, going to the store, buying it, getting back home, or even going to the store, having the little interaction with the clerk, talking to them, getting back in the car, going home, getting my lube, getting into my room, unpeeling like the plastic wrapper and opening up the fresh bottle, getting everything set up. I realized I was addicted just as much so to that component as I was the actual poppers. And so when I was able to break down that I was addicted to the auditory sound from sniffing the poppers, and then the actual ritual of going to get the poppers, it was the same thing at the end when I was addicted to like painkillers and heroin, was that I wasn't even addicted to the painkillers or the heroin anymore. I was addicted to the whole process of like hitting up the dealer, getting the money together, counting it out, going, getting the little baggie, you know, or the bundle or whatever it is I was picking up, getting that, you know, chopping it up, you know, getting my straw ready, you know, having my little mirror that I did it on. Like, it was that whole ritual that I was leading up to, that I was, at the end, I was just addicted. In the very beginning, I will say with the poppers though, that it was very much that feeling of it, but towards the end of the addiction, as you've done it. And another thing that I realized that's sad, and this is the case with all these addictions, but with poppers, it applies just as much, is that the first time you ever sniff poppers, you'll be like high as fuck. Like you'll be watching, and they don't last very long. When you're not used to doing them, the highs could last like maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, but like over time, as you do it, it only lasts like maybe 30 seconds, very, very short. Anyway, the first time that you do it, you're gonna feel incredible. And then every time after that, you're basically chasing the high that you got the first time. And so realize that with all these types of addictions, and with poppers addiction, it's never gonna be like that first time or that first couple of weeks that you were doing it, because your body's never come in contact with it. So yeah, of course it's amazing. And that's why these things are like, try them a couple times because they're amazing, and then you just gotta cut them out of your life and stop doing them. And poppers is really hard because, again, I always say, like, and guys, I'm so happy that you're here on this journey too, because these addictions, no one really is talking about like poppers and femdom, not that I've seen. And maybe I'm just tooting my own horn, but when you mesh all these things together, the poppers and the self-destruction with the femdom and the dopamine hits with the porn and your biological processes of wanting to jerk off, and then the negative loops that you're then in your head, and the dropping your winner effect, putting you more into a loser effect, draining your energy into the more endless loop, more drugs, more jerking off, like all these, when you're coming at all these different things and they're all, you know, combining together, now you have this fucking web that is really hard, like, to untangle it, right? This is the web, and everything's jammed. Like, here's an addiction, here's an addiction, here's a substance addiction, you know, dopamine hit, right? Everything's jammed in there, and it's really hard. You got to work this one out, right? You can get loose a little bit. You work this one out, you know, get loose a little bit, work this one out, and then you finally can get it out. And even when it's just dealing with one, there's even addictions like that within just one addiction, and then as the whole with lots of these things. So, you know, you really got to buckle in and realize that it took me like 3 years. I believe I was on poppers hardcore for 2 years, like basically with daily use, and then like intermittently, like maybe a few times every couple of weeks for like the past year. And like I said, at the end, I was mainly doing the poppers just to watch, like even like YouTube videos I would sniff poppers and watch, or ASMR videos I would sniff poppers and watch. I was doing it a little bit to porn. I was doing it a fair amount to porn, but it initially started with femdom, but then at the end I was able to beat the femdom. And so I beat the femdom first, and then the poppers addiction lingered on past that. So I know how hard that it's gonna be, and I can tell you that I've gotten it handled now. And the poppers addiction was hard. I mean, and like I said, I've beaten other addictions, like, and that was another thing that I just wanted to touch on really quickly, is this idea of, like, I noticed that when I was younger, I would always tell myself, like, oh, I have, like in my head, I'd be saying, oh, I have an addictive personality. I have addictive personality. And I almost wonder, because in the book that I'm reading right now, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, it very much talks about, you know, what is the cause of addiction? And of course, there's never a single cause, but then it dives into that question that I posted recently in one of the short videos that I made, you know, the femdom nature versus nurture question, right? How much of it is genetic versus how much of it is exposure? And so I was, the point is that, you know, with the poppers, when I tried it, I just got hooked. I'm sure there's a lot of other people that have sniffed poppers before and probably hated it, and that was like the only time they did it. And so, but for me, man, it just like, it sunk its claws into me, man. And I mean, who knows how many, and the thing too with the poppers is that it actually gets really expensive, because it's not like you just buy one bottle and you can endlessly sniff of that bottle. The bottles go stale. And so I was buying them from this like sex shop that's like a few miles, it's pretty close to where I live. And I was usually buying bottles there. They have like the big ones, they're like 30 something, 35 bucks a bottle. And oftentimes I'd be picking up, you know, several bottles per month even. And, you know, so, I mean, over time, over the last 3, I mean, I probably spent several $1,000s easily on poppers. So, it also, you know, starts to, and we can go into that too. I wanted to make this a really long late night, but my phone, I didn't charge it. And, I gotta get a better, I want to invest into like a really serious camera, but I mean, the iPhone's not bad and it's good for these late night sessions. I usually have a charger with me, but I brought the, let's see if I have it with me. Yeah, I didn't bring the other cord, so if it kicks out, I'll film another part later, but I'll film till it runs out anyway. So, and let's just pause here for a second anyway. All right, yeah, so my buddy's back there. If you see him working out late night, I guess. And maybe you'll see him do some heavy shit. Anyway, I just figured I'd just pause the video while I said what's up. So, trying to loop back here onto this idea of poppers addiction, right? Like, what is fueling it? What is keeping you stuck there? And again, I think one place to start is realizing that if you've been on poppers for a long time, it's very unlikely that you can just, well, let me say, number one, you can go cold turkey in the sense that poppers, they're not physically addictive. And so I had periods of, let's say, even maybe 5 months where I literally did it every single day without missing a day. And then I could stop for a week, let's say. I wouldn't get any physical relapses, or I should say physical withdrawals. I would be fine physically, but it's the psychological addiction and you get hooked on that feeling. So if you've been on them for a long amount of time, what I would suggest is at first start with trying to just reduce it by maybe 10%, and then get so you can reduce it by another 10%, right? And then maybe over the course of a few months, you've been able to reduce it by 25%, 30%. And so maybe instead of doing them every day, if you're really hardcore like I was doing them every day, what if you can get it so that you are doing them 6 days per week? Start with that. Or even if you continue to do them every day, instead of doing them for a multi-hour session, what if, let's say you were doing a 3-hour session, let's just say, what if you could cut that down to a 2-hour session and then cut it down to a 1-hour session? So don't think that just because you can't immediately stop that you're not making progress. And so ideally, if you could just be like, wake up immediately, like, this is a terrible idea, what am I doing, and just cut it out immediately, I mean, that would be ideal. But in my experience with addiction, and again, I've had the experience with poppers addiction, Femdom addiction, porn addiction, heroin, alcohol, cigarettes, Adderall, Klonopin for a little bit. It's just very unlikely that that's going to be the trajectory of it. Right? It's very unlikely that you're going to be hardcore addicted to something and then just immediately flip the switch and then you never do it again. It goes back to that whole mind state where I always talk about, we want things to just magically wake up one morning and without doing any work, it's just like vanished, is gone. And there's very few things in life that is the case, and you wouldn't want that to be the case too. And that's another big message that I'm always trying to say. And what you have to realize with the poppers too is that if you've been on them for several years, I was on them for about 3 years, the process, might not be the thing that you want to hear the most, but I actually look at it very optimistically, is that you'll be able to reduce it right away, but you're not going to be able to necessarily end it right away. And it's the same thing with a Femdom addiction or a porn addiction. you kind of, again, look at that. Going back to the same model, what if you could reduce it 1% per week and consistently do that week after week? After a year, you would have reduced it by 50%. After 2 years, you would have reduced it by 100%, you know, completely. So that's really the mind state. And of course, over time, if you can do it a little bit more, then that's ideal, right? I think that if you work with me on this, and I can show you especially some of the things that really held me up for a long time with kind of relapsing on poppers, is I think you could probably cut it down to even maybe a few weeks to a few months and completely get it handled, even if you've been on them for a long time. And what I noticed too was that after a while, where I would get it to the point where I might be going a couple of weeks without doing them, and then I would relapse on them, I found that it was usually, and I talked about this before, 2-week cycles for me. So it would be 2 weeks where I'd be clean, wouldn't do any poppers, and then 2 weeks where I'd relapse on porn or on Femdom. And then those would be when I was doing the poppers in there. And when I started to notice these like triggers, or I should really say these cycles of addiction, that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to come up on the 2-week mark after being clean, after being focused. And what's really interesting too with the poppers is that when I get in that stage, when I was in one of those 2-week cycles and I was in the popper cycle, I was just, everything would go to shit. And I talked about this in my TikTok relapse video. Everything when I would relapse would fail miserably. My diet would be shit. I'd be like eating candy, Burger King every day, Popeyes, just junk. I wouldn't be showering a lot of days. I wouldn't be brushing my teeth. You know, I wouldn't be doing any of my normal daily things that I would be doing, like journaling, reading, none of that. All that would just go out the window, and I would just be obsessed with like poppers and porn, or poppers and Femdom. And it's really crazy when you enter into one of those cycles to how it's almost this schizophrenia, this kind of bipolar feeling, to where it's like when I'm not in a cycle and I'm in a working and focus cycle, I'm like, I have no desire to do poppers. I have no desire to watch porn. In all honesty, it makes me sick even thinking about it. And that's the level that I want you guys to get to, is to where while you're still in this poppers addiction, this Femdom addiction, the porn addiction, you're yearning for it. Like you want it. You think there's some sort of payoff and you're trying to seek it out. And when you get to the level where it's like it sickens you, like you know that it makes you sick, you know that you actually really don't want to do it, and you couple that with realizing your triggers and realizing your cycles, meaning realizing how long are the periods that you feel like you can go in productivity without the drug, without the poppers, without the Femdom, and then start to realize that. And then starting to realize that it's likely with the poppers, a lot of the auditory components is weird as shit, plus the fact that it's just completely derping you out and numbing you, so you feel like you just, that ultimate escape. Really remember, that escape is trying to escape from yourself. If you have self-love, if you have presence, if you have this like inner integrity, then the poppers, thinking about it, will actually make you sick. And here's a really interesting thing that I noticed, was that when I cultivated that inner self-worth, respect, presence, awareness, I didn't like doing the poppers anymore. Whereas before I would be like, wow. When I was in that self-destruction, the poppers felt like I was in fucking heaven. Like, this is amazing. I got no worries. I feel light. Everything sounds amazing. Things look cool. I'm relaxed. I don't have to worry. After I had worked on myself, it was the complete opposite. I would do that. They would make me feel sick. I'd be like, what am I doing? They would make me feel anxious. They'd give me a headache. They'd give me just this feeling of uneasiness. And it's that idea of, it's like when you're coming from presence in this very solid base, the poppers then, they actually don't feel good. And you have to get to this level, because as long as you're fighting it, you're fighting the poppers, you go a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month being clean without it. And then you lose your willpower, then the poppers come. And for me, if you're anything, you know, like this, which I'm assuming, you know, a lot of guys are, let me know, work on this stuff and get it handled. When you go back onto the poppers, everything else just completely tanks, where you feel like you're a completely different person. And it's so debilitating and it's so depressing when you're like, why is this happening? And for me, why it was hard was because, like I said, even after I beat Femdom addiction, I was still doing the poppers about every 2 weeks. Like I said, that was my cycle. And so I was like, I really had to break it down. I call it compartmentalizing the addiction. You have to look at all the different areas that are creating this addiction that you can't break, and trying to figure out really what are the things, the sticking points that you can't get past, what's pulling you back towards it, and what is this driving this, what is powering this addiction. And so with the poppers specifically, like I said, for me, what I noticed, it was the auditory sound that I would get. Some of it would be escaping myself, but towards the end of the addiction, it was really the ritual of going to the store, having the conversation, making a transaction, getting the bottle, feeling like, oh, I got this, I attained it. Going back home, getting my whole jerk-off setup ready, like I said, with the coconut oil, the bottle, the lube, all that stuff, and then opening up the fresh bottle, right? And it was that process. There was other things as well, but towards the end, when I was able to really isolate that kind of ritualistic component to the addiction, then I was finally able to fully target the addiction. Like I said, I broke it down in many other things with triggers, cycles, self-destructive tendencies, you know, the Femdom addiction, the porn addiction, all these things were tying to masturbation addiction is another big one that you got to go against. So all those were feeding into it. But at the end, the breaking it down into those last two, the auditory and the ritual, were huge. And once I did that, I was finally really able to make massive progress. So then I was able to not just go, like before that, I couldn't go more than 2 weeks without getting a bottle of poppers. You know, in the beginning, I was doing it every day. Then I might get to the point, and eventually I got to the point where it was like that 2 week mark, and I couldn't get past the 2 week mark. I was stuck there. And then finally, I was able to get to 3 weeks. I did that, I was able to get to 4 weeks, and I was able to get to 5 weeks, right? And then, even if you do, like if you're going like a solid, you know, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, then, and you get a bottle of poppers and you just stay on it like for like 1 or 2 days, it's like, it's all good, you know what I mean? Like at least it's not really ruining your life, in the sense that I would almost look at it as like smoking a joint on a Friday night, or having a couple of beers on the weekend or something like that. But in order to get to that point, you got to do all this work and break down and see where are your sticking points, why are you getting pushed back towards the poppers. And the poppers is a nasty addiction to have, because like I said, it's intertwined with a jerk-off addiction, it's intertwined with a porn addiction, a Femdom addiction, escapism, the actual dopamine rush, or whatever you're getting from the actual drug itself, plus the ritualistic component, the visual component, the auditory component. There's a lot that goes into being addicted to poppers and Femdom, being addicted to poppers and porn, being addicted to poppers and jerking off. It's actually, you gotta untangle a lot of stuff. And I'm gonna walk back. I'm gonna continue to film this video a little bit. My phone is about to die, and let me hop in here. I'll see you guys in just a second. All right, so I just had to say bye to my buddy. It's funny, it's like midnight right now, and he's just starting his workout. So it's actually a pretty sweet setup over there. It's like a private gym, and he's a grad student So it's basically like he has access to this like full gym facility, like tons of power racks, like lots of weights, and he's basically like the only one. He has the key to get in there, and he's basically like, it's his own private gym basically over there. So it's a pretty good deal for him anyways. Late as shit to work out. But somehow my phone still has a charge on it, so I guess I'm just gonna keep on going as I'm walking back. And this video was I like to do these late night sessions as like a very much a low-key type of environment where I like to do more long-form content where I'm thinking about these ideas. And you know, going back to you know, Femdom, and going back to the poppers, it just was really crazy how I could even beat the Femdom addiction, but I wasn't able to beat the poppers. And so I really, and really like going back and thinking about it, after I beat my Femdom addiction, it was probably another solid year of being on and off of poppers. Like I said, roughly in those 2 weeks, it would be 2 weeks clean, and then somewhere between a week on poppers, or it would vary. Sometimes it might be like 2 or 3 day cycles. Other times it might be a full 2 week cycle where I would be on them. And it was like that for about another year after I had beat Femdom. And it really was one of those things to where I was like, almost to the point where I was very depressive, in the sense where I was like, I don't know how to beat this addiction. And I think to people where they've never, you know, heard of poppers, or if you guys that are into Femdom don't know what they are, just stay away from them, right? There's no need to ever go into them. Like, because I'm talking about these things, I just try to make this channel like the complete guide to everything on how to beat these type of addictions. And I do think that poppers play a huge component in both Femdom addiction and porn addiction. And I think that not talking about them would really be a disservice, because like I've been there with everything when it comes to this Femdom addiction. And you know, poppers is one of the things that was keeping me in it. And I think that that doesn't mean that I want any of you guys that haven't done them to go try them, because it's just, it's not dangerous in the sense that I don't really think poppers are physically that bad for you. I think that because you're putting the bottle to your nose, that maybe I felt like a little bit of burn sensation on my nose. I also felt like my lung capacity would go down when I would do longer streaks, like day after day after day. Like I would get more winded more easily walking up like a staircase. But as far as like the actual physical other stuff, I don't think that they're probably really all that bad. But the psychological dependence is like a fucking knife into you. Like it's just, it's really hard to, and that's another thing too. I always talk about upping the ante. And so as you've been into Femdom longer, then it's like you are always searching for that next thing that's going to give you that like really intense rush, that like next level that you haven't done. And so for me, it was just poppers was one of those levels. And once I started doing that, I always had to have it. You know, it wasn't like I could enjoy just regular Femdom anymore, or like regular porn. I had to have poppers with the Femdom or poppers with the porn. And so like I said, it'll actually, you know, end up costing a bunch of money with that type of addiction, because you're buying bottle after bottle, and a tremendous amount of time, and just an entire extra step of addiction that you're tying in to an already really fairly complex addiction because, like I said, you have to deal with the jerking off addiction, right? That basic biological process. You have to deal with the self-destruction, the negative looping. You got to deal with the social media component of porn and femdom, right? With Twitter and Reddit and whatever you guys are on, that whole component. And then on top of that, you're throwing in other drugs into the mix, like poppers, or I know, you know, weed's a big one, alcohol's a big one. I've seen guys in femdom that were addicted to like psychedelics, like they would take acid and then like, there was this one guy, I remember he was like, he was huge in the femdom scene. Like he would literally do like $20,000 tributes, and you would like see them being posted on Twitter. And he was big into like taking mushrooms and acid and stuff, and like literally going into like 12-hour straight binges where he would like drop like $50,000 or something like that in tributes. And you know what I'm saying? And again, that's just an example of, you know, a guy that has to just do so much to hit that type of continuing to hit that femdom high. And so the more layers that you element in to this addiction, the harder that it's going to be to then ultimately get out of it. And like I said, I was able to stop the femdom before I was able to stop the poppers. I couldn't figure out why I was able to beat these others and not the poppers. And so I'm just going to wrap it up here because it's completely dark. I can't even really see where I'm going. If you want to hop on a call with me, I can break down exactly what I think are some of the key, really like sticking points for a lot of people when it comes to poppers addiction and what it was for me. And as I say, that whole decompartmentalizing or compartmentalizing, however you want to say it, where you're breaking down, okay, I have the poppers addiction. I realize that there's other things that I'm doing that are addictions like femdom on top of that, but what exactly within that poppers addiction are the different compartments that I need to look at? And like I said, one more time, for me, it was that auditory component that I was addicted to and the actual ritual. This is at the end of my poppers addiction. Realizing that, coupled with realizing my 2-week cycles, that was a big one, because then I could prepare for it coming. I knew that 2 weeks was coming up. And so, bit of a rambly video, and I'm gonna wrap it up here just because I'm, like I said, I can't really see where I'm going. But you know, for any of you guys that are going through poppers addiction, realize that I will be here and you can do it. You will accomplish it. It's completely doable. You just need to break it down and even have the mindset of just start to reduce it by 1% per week. And if you can do that, that's a 50% reduction in a year. That's a lot. Now you've freed up half your time that you're not on poppers. You do that the next year, you're completely off of it. Now I think that we can do it much faster than 2 years. I think that I could bring you out of it within 2 weeks. I fully believe that, just because I have a massive amount of experience with this stuff, and I've got a ton of resources that I put together. I'm always making videos. I've got tons of writing. I've got guided releases, got tons of ideas. So hop on a free call with me. I'd be happy to walk you through exactly how to do it. And, you know, if you're looking to really hop into it fast, hop into the courses and hop into coaching with me, because then we'll just fucking tackle it like that. So totally doable. You guys got it. You're going to come out on the other side. And yeah, I'm going to go home and make some food and watch The Mandalorian. It's great talking with you guys. Another late night session in the books. I'm out.